Welcome to the Authentically Elisa podcast, Reshaping Business with Integrity, the podcast where you explore how to run your business authentically and with integrity. I'm your host, Elisa Boogaerts, a business coach and launch manager, helping coaches launch their programs and events that align with their business values. Together, we'll uncover these secrets to building a successful business without sacrificing morals, ethics, authenticity, or heart. Let's dive in. All right, so let's dive into today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about what might happen in a few years with the whole economy and the financial industry. And today, my guest is Murray Sabrin. And Murray, tell us a little bit about you and how you got into your field of work, what it is, and just why you're so passionate about it.
Okay, let me give you a quick bio. I came to America in 1949 with my older brother and parents, who were the only ones in their family to survive the Holocaust in native Poland. I grew up in New York City, went to the schools. I started teaching in the New York City public schools, and after a couple of years realized this was not for me. So in 1972, I went to graduate school full-time to earn a PhD. I wrote a dissertation on inflation, how inflation spreads through the economy and affects local areas, and spent many years doing that. Then I got a job in the investment field, the economic research field. And in 1985, I got a job at Ramapo College in New Jersey, teaching finance, where I was for 35 years and retired in 2020. And my favorite course teaching was the financial history of the United States, which brings me to all sorts of conclusions about where we are, where we're headed, and how people should be aware that the financial future could be very problematic if the financial cycles that I've observed throughout American history continue.
Interesting. So tell us a bit about that. What are the trends that you're seeing, and what do you think might happen?
Well, when I started teaching financial history, I taught students how these financial cycles unfolded. And we read research by some of the top financial historians and economists in the country. And then as time went on, I noticed there's a pattern there. Whenever there's a major financial crisis, there tends to be 100 years later another financial crisis. And so if you go back to 1792, there was a crisis in the beginning of the Republic. And then we had another major crisis, the Panic of 1893, which is roughly 100 years later. And then we had 100 years from that is, 1993. So 1990 was the savings and loan crisis. So that was the first one. Then the most interesting one is America's first Great Depression, 1819. Fast forward, you have the Forgotten Depression, as it was called, of 1920 after World War I. And then in 2020, we had the economy implosion because of the COVID lockdowns. And then I noticed 1929. Well, if we go 100 years forward from 1929, we go to 2029. And if this pattern repeats itself, it means 2029 could be a repeat to some degree of 1929. And we know how that ended, a decade-long depression, the first time in U.S. history that we had a depression that lasted more than a decade. Plus, we hit 25% unemployment in 1933. And many businesses folded. The stock market declined 90%, and it reached bottom in 1932, 33. And since then, it's been up from a major super cycle beginning in the 1930s, with, of course, bumps along the way, like we had in 1969, 70, 73, 74. And of course, 2020, we had a 35% decline in 6 weeks. And these are the cycles that repeat over and over again. But my job as an educator and a speaker is to point these phenomena out and let people know that there are things that they can do individually, for their family, for their businesses, to weather the storm, because there are storms every few years in the U.S. economy. And there's another interesting phenomenon I observed. Beginning in 1920, there's been a recession in every year ending in zero, except 2010, when the recession started in 2008 with the housing crisis. So that's another interesting phenomenon. So if that pattern continues, then 2030 will be another down year in the U.S. economy.
Right. Wow. So it's gonna be like a double whammy
Yeah,
in
well,
29
that's
and
it.
30.
You got a confluence of two cycles appearing in 2029 and 2030. Now, whether it's going to happen, I don't know for sure, but I would say right now the probability is probably 90% that it'll happen.
Wow, that's crazy. So it's well, as we're recording this is 2025. So we got a few years to kind of prepare ourselves.
Right.
What do you have any sort of recommendations of what people or what business owners could do, especially like those solopreneurs, entrepreneurs?
Yeah, business owners have to realize that the economy is in cycles. They know that. They see their sales on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And when the economy softens up, which is what's happening right now because private payrolls are declining in the United States, or they're staying flat, which means that companies are not expanding the way they have during an economic upswing. So for businesses, it's a matter of managing their inventories very tightly, because the last thing you want to do is build up inventories. Then all of a sudden your sales fall out of bed and you're in deep, deep trouble. You've got all this inventory, then you have to slash prices to move the inventory. And what does that mean? The bottom line is going to be really hurt badly. So it's keeping a lean inventories, making sure that you have enough cash on hand for working capital, to have good lines of credit with your local bank. These are all the things that businesses need to do, especially the mom and pop businesses on Main Street. And big businesses are pretty much insulated, but they too downsize during a downturn, especially the auto industry.
Mm.
And right now, the auto industry is sort of betwixt and between, because people have loaded up on debt. We have $1 trillion in consumer debt in the United States. We have $1 trillion a year in interest expense on the federal debt. So we are
Ugh.
awash in debt. We're awash in money. And that's what's keeping prices up. Housing prices are starting to crack in some areas around the country. So for the individual, it's making sure you have at least 6 months to a year of living expenses in a savings account or a money market account. You need to have some precious metals as a sort of an insurance policy in case things really get haywire, where prices go through the roof. We've seen precious metals the last year go up 47%. It's been one of the best performing assets in the world
Wow.
for the past 12 months. And so people know, who understand these cycles, like these big hedge fund managers, that these things can be devastating to an individual and family's finances and to a small business. So again, these are things that I talk about when I'm invited to speak, and I want to get the message out with my new initiative, Make Americans Financially Independent. I have a website, mafiusa.com. It should be MAFIA, Make Americans Financially Independent again, because before the Great Depression, families and communities were basically financially independent. They didn't have much income, they didn't have much wealth, but they took care of themselves. There wasn't any big welfare programs out of Washington, D.C. State and local governments had very minor programs. This was the essence of Americana for many decades, that people took care of themselves in the local communities. They were called mutual aid societies. And the wonderful thing about reading the history of mutual aid societies is that they did everything for people. They did unemployment insurance, life insurance, medical care. They did everything so people in their own communities would not have to feel that they're being abandoned when things get tough.
Right. Wow. I didn't realize that. That's very interesting. So, okay. So, a couple of things we can do is, start saving. And I remember actually
Absolutely.
I had to talk with somebody before, and they were saying, I thought was really good, is that in terms of like, loans or lines of credit and things like that, even though maybe you're doing well right now and you don't feel like you need a line of credit, but you might need it when things get a little rough. But so you can apply for it now and you can get it now, not necessarily use it, but it's there for, when the times get tough and you have it, because when the times start to get tough, you're not going to be able to get that loan then, but you could get it now. So get it now and kind of keep it on the
Well, it's
side.
important to have relationships with more than one bank, because if one bank rejects your application for a line of credit, or at least can't give you credit that you need in order to carry the inventory that you have, then you need to go to another bank. So it's important to develop those local relationships with the bankers in your community, and that's why it's important to go to these events and meet the bankers, get to know them. They get to know you. They get to know your business. And again, this is all about relationships. Business is all about relationships and making sure that people that you're dealing with are honest, they're ethical, they're truthful, and you are truthful as a business owner, that you don't try to pull the wool over someone's eyes. You let them know exactly what the status of your business is, and you don't try to fudge the books, as they say. Just be honest. And the one thing that I learned a long time ago, if you're truthful, you never can be called a liar.
That's a really good one. Yeah. Yeah. And actually this whole season of this podcast is about, running your business with integrity. So how do you think that we can sort of reshape business to be more in integrity?
Well, there are so many pressures on business today, from federal, state, and local governments, from activist groups who are thinking that the businesses should be more proactive in social issues, things like that.
Mm.
Businesses have one responsibility: to provide the best product or service for their consumers. And the bottom line will increase as they do that successfully. And the marketplace is the most democratic institution we have, because it's $1, one vote. And people don't realize that. And the other point I want to make, which I've given a lot of thought to, is that government officials think they can manage the US economy, of a $28 trillion economy. Well, they couldn't do it in the Soviet Union, and they had all the resources in the world. The economy works quite well because of men and women entrepreneurs all around the country who have been trained to meet consumer needs. And that's the beauty of the US economy. One of my favorite books I have, which was one of those oversized books that you find in a dentist or a doctor's office, it's entitled "They Grew America," or "They Created America." I forgot the exact title. And it's a profile of all the great entrepreneurs for 200 years in America: the inventors, the innovators, the creators. And that's what built America. It wasn't the people in Washington, as good as they may be, but when you put them together, they make really bad decisions about the economy. And that's what I've been following for the past 50 plus years.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. Yeah. Like a lot of, like, all the countries, even Canada as well, because I'm in Canada, and it's the same as that. Yeah. It's the local businesses really that fuel the economy. And I love buying local. I love going to the local markets. And of course, there's always the big names that you do kind of shop at, but I much prefer to shop local and get it. Well, not just because of the whole thing that's happening in the US right now. I've always been this way before all that, but yeah, just to buy, and go to your little local shop, go to your mom and pop, go to that little restaurant down the road, and support your local community and your local businesses. And I really think that'll come back to you. And at the end of the day, who knows if they'll be the ones left, right? Because they are fueling the economy.
Well, the thing is, we have so much competition in our economy. You've got your Main Street businesses, you've got the big box stores, you've got the department stores, the supermarkets. You have e-commerce, which has exploded in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful thing about technology, is that we can get things literally overnight. I mean, that's unheard of. Growing up, when we used to see the infomercials on TV before cable that we had, you call up an 800 number and maybe you'd get the product in 2 weeks if you're lucky. And to return it was a hassle. Now that they have liberal return policies, especially at Costco, you can buy something and they'll take it back in a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. And so that's one of I think the benefits of being a Costco member is that they really treat you well. They don't try to nickel and dime you. And the hot dog is still $1.50, which is amazing.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's hilarious. Sometimes if I go to Costco on like a Sunday morning, there's people eating hot dogs, and it's like 9:30 in the morning. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, you're right. That is one of the ones they don't nickel and dime you, and they do have really good customer service in that way. Yeah, yeah. So that would be great for more companies to kind of think that way, and figure out how they can integrate that so they can be more in integrity with their businesses.
Yeah, there was a series of programs on PBS many decades ago, and there was one businessman who said there are two rules in business. One is the customer is right, and number two, check number one. And so if you treat your customers well, they're going to come back to you. I mean, I had that thing with not Costco, Best Buy a few years ago when we were living in New Jersey before we moved to Florida. There was something wrong with the refrigerator that we bought there. and they said it was out of warranty. Then they emailed us back saying we made a mistake, was in warranty, and they gave us a refund for the refrigerator, which was great. So we become Best Buy customers because they really made us whole, because the refrigerator was on the fritz, and they said, well, it's too bad, it's out of warranty. But then they checked their records and they came back and said, okay, we made a mistake.
Yeah, yeah. There's something about loyalty, isn't there? And so
Uh,
being loyal yourself and also getting those loyal customers with you. And you do that by, yeah, treating them right and knowing the customer's always right. Yeah,
no,
that's
that's
amazing.
the thing about the business world, is that if you do everything right, or 90% right, yeah, your business is going to grow. And when your businesses grow, again, think of all the businesses that started on a dining room table or a kitchen table or a basement and just blossomed. I mean, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniacki started the Apple computer, and it just grew and grew and grew. And uh, you got to take your hats off to these young people who have
Hmm.
incredible ideas. My wife and I have been watching reruns of Shark Tank, which I never watched when I was teaching, which I was surprised, because it's such an interesting show. And I told my students when I started teaching in the mid '80s that in America, if you come up with one good product, you could become very wealthy. If you come up with a great product, you can become super wealthy. And there are products on Shark Tank where the one that all the sharks didn't invest in. None of them invested in Ring, uh, by a New Jersey entrepreneur who I knew. I met him a couple of times, but I knew his father very well. He just sold the company. It's a video doorknob, video.
Yes. Oh, I was going to say, is it the security cameras? Yeah.
Yeah, he sold it to
Exactly.
Amazon for $1 billion,
Wow.
and all the sharks passed on the opportunity to invest in it.
That's crazy. I actually have a Ring camera. That's too funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's quite amazing. It is very amazing. I worked for a company called Intuit, and they
yeah,
own
sure.
many different countries. And Intuit started again, they had like the kitchen table of where the idea was. And I think it was like, the person's mom or something. I don't know. And they actually had it like in the office, like this is the table where it all began. And I just thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. Sometimes it's just one small idea, built somewhere, and you never know where it can go.
Well, the thing is about business is that sometimes it happens by accident, sometimes it happens by design. But if you come up with one good idea that there is a market for, the market's going to tell you very quickly if the product or service is viable. And
Hmm.
that's the beautiful thing about the market. You get feedback almost instantaneously. You
Yeah.
put it on Amazon, you put it in a local store, if they'll give you shelf space, and you'll know very quickly. But the people who are buyers for these companies, they have a pretty good sense of what's going to sell or not, because they have a good idea of what the customer wants. That's why so much is done in market research. There's a ton of money
Yes.
spent on market research, and
Hmm.
I just love speaking to entrepreneurs and business people, because they're the ones that really make the world go round. They're the ones that make our life more comfortable, whether it's air conditioning or other products that without which here in Florida, you couldn't live here without air conditioning. It would be impossible to live in Florida without air conditioning. And
Yeah.
some and one of the products in that book that they made America is a woman from New Jersey who invented the thermostat.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I mean, and
Love
it's a
it.
woman of color, and she invented the thermostat, and no one knows her name, but it's one of the great inventions of all time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to give, based on what we spoke of today, what's a one specific action that our listeners could do today?
Well, I think they need to keep their pulse on their business, exactly the ebbs and flows of their business, and have that cash reserve in their business, and not let it go down below a certain level. And they're the ones that will know exactly how much they need. If they do a scenario, what if my business falls 10, 20, 30, 40%? Can I pay the rent? Can I pay my workers? Will my, like, can I extend invoices on my purchase orders and things like that. And then, of course, getting paid is another thing if you're a business owner.
Yes.
The last thing you want to do is have all these invoices outstanding and not get paid. Then you're in a real bind because you're selling, but you're not collecting revenue. And this is why it's important to have a good relationship with your customers as well, your suppliers and your customers. And if you're a retail business, you want to be you want to have the ability to get product because of the supply chain disruptions that we saw during COVID. You want to have that relationship with your suppliers that you can get goods in a timely manner, because it could get very dicey out there. And one thing I did when I was a staff economist in Massachusetts in the early 80s, every month I wrote an article about the automobile industry, and we would get Ward's weekly report, and they had all the data on the automobile companies and how much inventory they had on hand. And during the second oil shock in 1979, we saw the inventory level spike and how many days it took to sell these big cylinder cars. And I wrote an article about that, saying that the industry is in deep trouble if the number of days of inventory go from 30 to 60 to 90. You know that they're piling up inventory and have to cut back production, lay off workers. So again, it's pretty easy to figure out where the economy is going if you have reliable data about supply and demand.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a very interesting conversation. I've absolutely loved it. So where can our listeners find you online?
Well, there are several places. One is mafiusa.com, my Substack, murraysabrin.substack.com, and my new website, Meet Murray Sabrin, where it talks about my availability for consulting, speaking, and portfolio analysis.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And to finish us off, do you have any final words of wisdom?
Well, it's all about perseverance and persistence. And if you send me your email, I'll send you a PDF of my memoir, From Immigrant to Public Intellectual, an American Story.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Murray. This has been such a great conversation. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope it inspired you to live a more authentic life. I'd love your help in inspiring more people to live authentically. So please follow, rate, and leave a review so we can create a ripple effect of authenticity. Until next time, stay true to you, be bold, and thrive on your own terms. This is Elisa, signing off authentically.